Okay, bye. Hello.
I should unmute first. We should have a couple more, maybe 3 more people signing up. I just was on a prospect call and I was like, y'all should get on this. So,
And I shared it to my social media. So I think we had one more registrant since we last talked. So we're at 18 now.
Good.
Excuse me. Phone's going crazy.
All right. So can I try to share my screen?
Yep. Let's see it. Do I need to give you control maybe? Oh, nope. There you go. Got it.
All right. And then I think I can go. Good. That's what I wanted to make sure I could see.
Perfect.
Should go back to the first slide. I think the first slide is, for whatever reason, it's the one of the event. It's not loading. So it'll load, like it's in the image, but it won't load when I go to present mode. So anyway, I'll probably just stick to that one.
Okay.
I've got your last name spelled right. Gonna be
Yeah, you do.
Okay. And then, so you can't see, you're just seeing the presentation. You're not seeing, like, if I open the chat, you won't see the chat, right?
Nope. Nope, I won't see the chat. I can see the bottom bar with your slide, but I think that will go away.
I don't know how to make that go away.
Are you
So
still in full screen mode?
there now. Can you still see it?
Yeah, but I don't think it's too much of a problem.
Okay.
It's right at the bottom, so.
Yeah. I don't know what. All right. Let me. I'm gonna put you on mute for just a quick second.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then Q&A I can open as well, right?
Yep, I have Q&A up on mine as well.
Okay. These things always make me so nervous. It'll be fine. Like I feel super prepared, probably more prepared than I've been in a while, but it's still.
It was funny because Joe and I did a practice session like the night before because it was like the first one of the series. I was like, well, let's just try it and we'll see. And we couldn't get her video to work. We couldn't get my screen share to work. We couldn't get like her audio kept going in and out. She had to call in on her phone. And I was like, oh God, this is going to be a disaster tomorrow. I was like, but you know what? We'll figure it out. And I got on and everything was fine. But it was just one of those things. Oh, we did accidentally exit practice mode before like close to the like 12 o'clock mark. I think we left it at like 11:40. And I was like, okay, well, it's going to be a little awkward, but it'll be fine. We'll get there. So I just have to keep saying like, hey guys, we'll get started in just a minute. Please bear with us for like 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
But it all worked out okay.
Is the background and everything okay?
Yes.
Can you see my sty? I'm so pissed.
No, what happened?
When I did on the left eye, when I did the one for San Antonio, I had a sty on the right eye.
Oh my God.
It was worse. At least this one's starting to get better. I was supposed to be interviewed yesterday for a thing. My coach is doing a big event. I get to be interviewed and it'll get shown on the live event. And I'm like, David, we have to do it next week. I can't. My eyes swollen shut today. I can't. So it's evidently, I don't know. It's evidently something I'm allergic to in some new makeup. So I'm like, but I don't know what it is. And so it's like, I've just got to throw everything away and start over at this point.
Oh, that's the worst.
Because I can't keep having styes in my eye. Like, this is infuriating. This is my third one since February.
Oh my gosh.
And
I've ever had one.
As a kid, right? It's just like all of a sudden. And but it's sort of allergy-ish. And so it gets on the top lid, but then it swells up right below the eye too. And it's like, so anyway, the glasses are just hiding the sty today.
Well, good news. I can't see it. So.
Well, that's what I was like, I'll be a little tiny picture. The good news about having the PowerPoint is that tiny little picture.
Well, Joe was like, since the presentation will be up, do I need to be on camera? And I was like, no, totally up to you. Like, if you want to be on camera, you can. If you don't, like, you'll just be a little tile. She goes, well, I kind of talk with my hands. So I'd rather be just like there so they can see me. And I was like, cool, yeah, that works. But if you didn't want to be on video, you don't have to be on video.
That reminds me, I'm going to get some Post-it notes and point towards my little green dot to remind me to keep eye contact with the camera. I'll be right back.
Okay.
One thing I can't see right now is time. Will you do me a favor and in the chat, just to me, can you time me at half an hour?
Yep.
And at 45 minutes?
Yep.
Just so that I don't ramble. If you'll just give me 15 minutes, that'll keep me on, like, just give me a little alert every 15 minutes. That would be great.
I'm going to do that.
Thank you for doing this. I'm actually super excited about it.
I'm glad you sent me that email this morning because I kept thinking today was Thursday. And then you sent me that email and I was like, oh yeah, for tomorrow. And then I was like, for today. Oh boy.
sent me one about did I want to practice, and I kept meaning to. I was trying to figure out did I want to practice, and I really just finished the like it's a presentation I've done.
Yeah.
But I just redid it. So, and so I finished it this morning. I like got it all where I wanted it to be this morning, and oh, that reminds me. There's also. When we get there, at the end, there's some bit.lys.
Mm-hmm.
Type those in when they get there. One is like bit.ly price to prosper, and one is price to prosper 20, which is a 20-minute consult.
Okay.
Scheduler thing. So you just type those in for me at the end when we get there.
Yeah, like in the chat.
Yeah, in the chat.
Yeah.
Copy the links in.
Yeah, I can do that. You want me to send it to everybody or just to you?
No, to everybody. Like,
okay.
Just make it easy if somebody wants to click on it.
Yep, I can do that.
That'd be great. Because I'll start talking and I'll forget to do all that stuff. Oh, no, that was it. I'm going to go freshen my lipstick and I'll be right back.
Sounds good. Taylor, you want to put Moose in here? Maintenance guys just came in and Taylor just goes, okay, I'm going to take the dog for a walk. And I was like, did you tell them I'm in here?
What was that?
The maintenance guys just came into our house and I'm in the bedroom. And I just heard Taylor go, I'm going to take the dog for a walk. And I was like, did anybody say that I was in here doing a webinar? Our sink doesn't run for some reason. Like the shower runs, the tub runs, the bathroom sink runs, but the kitchen sink, for whatever reason, does not run.
Oh, wow. And then this is being set up as a webinar, so we won't see everybody.
Right. Yeah, we won't see anybody. I can see them if they join in the participants window. We'll see attendees.
Okay.
So actually. It says attendees cannot join until we broadcast, so we can.
Okay, you can go.
It about.
Yeah, go ahead and do. I'm good.
Okay.
I won't.
Let's broadcast. All right, and we'll give people some time to join. I sent out a reminder email to everybody that was registered, so we should.
Oh, and while we're waiting for other people to join, I talked to San Diego AIGA,
Mhm.
and they worked with Arizona, and so there's all of this documentation about how to run the portfolio review.
Oh, awesome.
So they're willing to work with us on that.
Cool. That would be great.
Provide the documentation. So I'll get all that for you after this is over.
Sweet. Thank you.
Yeah. We already filled up our reviewer spots.
Nice.
Crazy.
I'm excited for it. Should be good.
Yeah. You're not going to be on screen, right?
No.
Okay. I just I closed the AIGA window.
Oh, yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I'm just a logo.
Okay.
We currently have 3 attendees. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining early.
Hey, Miss Sue.
Can I have one of our attendees test the chat function and make sure that you are able to send me a message if needed? Perfect. Thank you, Sue. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to give folks a few more minutes to join here, grab their lunches, and y'all are on mute, so if you have lunches, don't worry. We won't hear any crunching. We got a chat last week that was like, am I okay to eat my chips? Yes, you are okay to eat your chips. You are on mute.
The worst is when somebody's not on mute and they're doing that. I'm on a bunch of group calls, obviously, like everybody these days, and it's like that's the part that drives me the craziest is people get on to a Zoom and they don't mute and they're having a conversation or they're yelling at their dog.
When it's like, especially if you're not the host and you can't mute other people.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a strange world we live in these days for sure. Now we got a couple more minutes, but we'll right at 12 o'clock if you want to get started. The first little part.
Sounds great.
Well, if people jump in a little bit late, it's just a little bit of context and all that.
All right, sounds good.
Oh, hey, Ashley Fuller. I see somebody on here that just signed up. Hey, Russell.
All right, it is 12 o'clock. Sherra, you want to get started? I'll give you. All right, so my name is Katie Brill. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am the Vice President of AIGA Atlanta, and I'm so excited for our second webinar in our Designer's Business Guide webinar series. Our host today is Sherra Bell. Sherra's been a business consultant, creative recruiter, and career coach for, over 20 years. She's a former AIGA Atlanta president, and she's currently our education chair on the board. We look to Sherra for lots of insights and wisdom as she's served the Atlanta community for a really long time. And so I'm very excited to hand it over to Sherra.
Thank you, Miss Katie. And thank you for making all this possible. And welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. Happy Friday. Happy end of May. It's weird to think that we're already into June already. Where does time go in our pandemic? So just a little bit, I put some social media hashtags up here if you're prone to those kinds of things. And I'll explain a little bit about my Creatives to Prosper as we're waiting on a few more people to jump in. In the work that I do with the AIGA in all the years, there's been lots of conversations about value of design and selling value. And because so much of my background is recruitment and sales and this idea of how designers are valued, I've been playing with this idea of sort of sub-community around creatives who prosper and the creatives who are really committed to building thriving businesses and building thriving lives off of being the most innovative people most people know. So I will tell you a little more about that as we go through the end, but that's sort of my official hashtag these days. So if y'all are tweeting or do anything, use that, please. So to get started, we'll just jump right in. Katie did a great introduction, so I don't really have to. What I would like to know is about y'all. So tell me who's here and tell me how you describe yourself. And generally speaking, this is a way I like to just think about all the people I tend to come across in this work, and then a little more specifically, because we're going to be talking about pricing, there's this idea of within the practitioner level, if you're not yet a business owner or you're not yet in that sort of management consultant, like how are you a practitioner? And then I included educators in as our leaders because they're both employees of colleges, but they're also leading our next generation. And as education chair, super appreciative of all our educators and what they do to help teach the students to sell value from the very early part of their career. And I speak a lot with the schools and stuff. Those I'll give a plug right now so I don't forget to do it. If you haven't seen, we're doing a portfolio review on June 27th and would really appreciate any of our design leaders serving as reviewers. We've filled up our reviewer spots right now, but I think there's going to be enough demand for it. We'll probably do a second one. So you'll go ahead and join the wait list if that's something that you're interested in. We'd love to have you. And the students would certainly appreciate it. They, as you know, are graduating into unprecedented times and are certainly legitimately concerned about their futures right now for whether or not the jobs coming right out of school are going to be there for them. So any feedback and any opportunities that you have, it's a great time to grab up an intern if you're looking for interns. So my last little shameless plug on that. But let's start talking about money. Basic elements of profit are revenue, expenses, and losses, right? Like just really basic understanding of how much money you make, how much does it cost you to make that money. And what I find though is when I talk about just straight profit with most of my creatives, it gets a little lost. And so what I've started, part of the Prosper piece that I talked about before, is I've started to really frame it more in this idea of, the elements of prosperity, which is that whole person view of, or a whole community view even of profit, right? That profit is, or prosperity more than profit is your talent being valued? Is it allowing you the time to have the relationships that you want? And is it giving you the security that you need, both for yourself and if you have employees, for your employees? And so when we talk about money, it's less about just the straight bottom line piece of it, but it's like, what does the money get you? And I think that fits the creative spirit a lot more than just a straight sort of, whenever I start talking just profit or just sales, people's defenses go up, and it's just not necessary, because if you're generating benefit, you should be making money, and it's okay to make money. And if you hear nothing else from today, hear that part, that we're here. There's a lot right now with the pandemic of, oh, I have to discount my services, and oh, I have to figure out ways to compromise to what's going on. And the market will tell you that you do, but the reality is if you're providing value, which is what we're going to talk about today, there's still plenty of money in the market for you to be prosperous and to be able to find your place in that. So the mindset of lack is exactly that. It's a mindset. And if you fall into it and you believe that the market is challenged in a way that you can't benefit from, then that will be reality. But my belief is that there's always opportunity. And I started my business in 2001, in August of 2001 to be specific, officially. I had been laid off from a staffing firm in March because the economy had already begun to tank and nobody was hiring recruiters because nobody was hiring. And I'm out in the market and decide that I will start to try to do my own. And as I talk to firms, one of the reasons I decided to start my own company was the more I talked to the people I used to recruit for, the more they needed help with sales. And so I ended up in the very beginning in 2001 working with some of the top agencies in Atlanta, helping them create sales systems. And it was in that process of understanding that even some of our most talented designers struggled with sales process. And I found my niche in that mix because I was able to, as someone, my design degree is from Auburn, so I have a BFA in design. I have a master's degree in diversity, which is this whole other part of my life. But in all that I learned around sales because of the recruiting, when I got into that in 97, I was able then to bring that into design community and really help show salespeople, or show designers about sales. And so it over the years has become this evolution around how how to help designers look at sales from a designer perspective rather than from the typical sales guy kind of perspective, which is different. And I moved on, which I often will do. Will y'all put in the chat who you are in terms of how you identify? Are you a business owner? Hey, Mark Hedges. Are you a business owner? Are you do you consider yourself a freelancer, a contractor? And sort of where is your perspective? And so if you'll populate chat with that for me, please. Get your fingers working and participate. It'll just help me know how to help do that. Good. I see some in-house, some freelancers, leader freelancer, independent creative, contract freelancer. I know there's some business owners on here, and I'm going to try to cover all of it. So it's nice to see, Alyssa from AIG Asheville. Hi, business owner, graphic designer. So glad to see y'all here. So what we want to talk about from a money perspective is the difference, whether you're in-house and working for somebody, or you're out on your own and running an agency, right? This difference between rate and price. And especially if you're a freelancer, there's the whole freelancer piece of what is my rate, and whether it's a day rate or an hourly rate. But the reality is that when you're talking about rate, you're talking about cost. When you're talking about price, you're talking about investment. You can talk about the return on that investment, and you can really dig into a conversation that is bigger than how much you cost, and it's easier to defend than how much you cost. And so we'll get into that a little bit more too. But my goal with all my clients is a 10 times return. And so, but you figure out what your return is for the clients that you get when you start to have these conversations around the return on their investment rather than the cost of something. Over time, you'll be able to figure out what your average is for your kinds of clients. And we're going to talk about how to think about projects in very specific ways so that you start to be able to align the conversation in their terms, not yours, and move out of them just trying to drive down your price by features and benefits kind of things. So this is a model I use with all of my clients that I found to be especially helpful around the money conversation, and in how to think about what you're selling in a way that simplifies it, so that that it's part of what people struggle with when they're selling is they don't know what to sell, or they have a lot of things they could sell. So it's not they don't know what to sell, but there's not a specific when you're developing your prospect list or you're developing the idea of who you want to work with, unless you have a specific idea of this thing you're selling. It's hard to know who you're selling it to. And when we can get really specific with that, it simplifies the sales process across the board. And so I usually start with my clients by working out what their favorite projects are, what they would like to replicate, what has been the most profitable for them, along with being the most enjoyable. And that piece, once we can get to that piece, and it's usually a pretty quick deliverable project. And in the graphic design, I've got some industrial designers on here, so it's a little different in some of their projects, but in the graphic design space, it's usually a project that's a 1 to 3 month term that you can deliver on pretty quickly and get a result from. And it's a small enough bite-sized sell that it's easier for them to say yes to, rather than going in and doing. A lot of my clients will think that's a branding project, but it's rarely actually a branding project, because it's hard to walk in the door cold with a prospect and sell them on trusting you with completely rebranding and telling their story. Whereas you could go in and do an initial project around an annual report or some other kind of singular project that has a definitive deliverable, and then, or a website or a brochure or a campaign of some sort that you can get in and out of pretty quickly, and they can make a pretty easy yes to. So that becomes our ideal project. And then you look at that from, and I'll talk a little more about what I mean by ideal, but with the ideal sell, you're looking for projects that are going to have some longevity to them and allow you to get more projects out of that client in the future. And that's your upsell. But the mistake I see with a lot of clients that I work with in the beginning is they're going in and trying to sell the upsell. And the upsells are really complex sell from the standpoint of sometimes there's a lot of decision makers, and a lot of people have to have input into it. And there's a bigger commitment. So people are they put you through a lot more hoops, and they might get more people involved in terms of competitive bids and things like that, where the ideal sell is a project you can get in and out of based off of a relationship. And but you want the ideal sell to be something that's going to lead to upsells and longer term engagements, but that you get there based off of sort of completing that first project and then being able to move forward and sell those other things. And then the downsell piece of it is called a prelude, in that it's that thing you do if they can't scope the ideal project. If they know they need something, and they know they have an idea of the deliverable, but they want you to do a complex proposal for it, and you're doing that complex proposal without enough information. And that I see so many of my clients really spinning their wheels on proposals over and over and over again, where they're essentially doing free thinking for their clients around the project and the problem in order to try to get the business. And then the client sits on the proposal or uses the proposal to get a competitive bid or does something else with it that then wasted that effort. And so what we look at instead is to try to figure out how to put a price tag on that work and sell that strategy and that thinking in advance. Yes, that is a lot of time wasted. But sell that in advance in terms of being in the midst of helping them think through the problem. And then what you're offering is, if it's more thought out, the proposal is more accurate. They can use the proposal to get whatever funding they need to get internally. They can also, you can also look for ways to help them mitigate costs and to make that as efficient a process as possible, rather than just sort of most of the proposals that designers do that I work with before I start working with them is there's a little bit of just shooting in the dark of, here's a really broad range of prices that you could, it could be this to this, and the client always will lower end the pricing, even though they want the higher end of the deliverable, and you give them a range, and now they think there's a lot of latitude to negotiate. Whereas if you can get in there with them, get them to spend a little bit of money on the front end, do the thinking with them, you're getting their buy-in all along the way, and by the time you come up with the bigger price, you've been able to move them to the value conversation. And it also gives you, as a designer, when you need some quick revenue, a way to go out and look for a very specific kind of project that can get you some quick, instant, prepaid, pay to initiate kind of revenue in the few $1,000 mark, right? So we'll talk about how that looks in pricing in just a second. But first I want to talk about ideal. And this is a silly little acronym I've been playing with, but this idea that an ideal project is interesting to you, something that you'd really like to do, that it is, that there is a tangible deliverable on the end, and that it's not a project that it's in that you're going to have a project to show, right? Ideal projects are projects that you want to be able to use as case studies and opportunities to get more work. And so you want to make sure that it's going to have that chance to be a deliverable and not just a concept, and that there's an excellence to them that you're proud of, that you can actually claim credit for them. There's a lot of projects that people will do where there's NDAs and things they can't show the work because it's not public facing. The ideal project for you as a business person or for someone looking for a job has to be something that you can show, so that you don't end up with these gaps in your portfolio of, well, I did all this really great work, but I can't show you. And so we want an ideal project to be something that you can show. And then I talked before about the idea of it leading to more, and always having that ability to upsell from whatever the project you do is a characteristic of an ideal project. And then we talk about ideal price. You can do the same kind of thing, again, kind of silly, but it's a way to think about it. this idea that price should always be an investment, not a cost. We talked about that earlier. You should always be able to defend the price, which means you have to understand in the sales process what they value, what the problem is costing them, how much they are, how much it will cost them not to solve the problem, as well as what the benefits of solving the problem will be, and then or the value of solving that problem. And so when you can monetize that and get them to speak about that in terms of money, then you can talk about what they're spending as a contrast to the what they'll make or what they'll save. You want your price to be expensive. You want them to wince a little. Like that's a communicator of your value, that they are not, if you go in too low, then they start to question, like, well, what don't I know about this person's value that they don't value themselves more? And so I always love it when someone says, that's a little more than I wanted to pay. Great, well, let's talk about why it's still worth it, right? And then the affordable piece is you have to know whether or not they legitimately can afford it, right? There's a difference between it being expensive and they'll figure it out versus it's affordable or not affordable, right? If you're talking to somebody with no budget and you're giving them $100,000 price, obviously it's not even a realistic conversation. And that's where having all the money conversations in advance around what they're trying to accomplish and what the value of that is so important before you ever quote a price. And then you're, again, being able to frame that in a way that you know that they can make a decision on that price and that you haven't priced yourself out. But that's, again, the problem with a lot of proposals is that in a proposal model, oftentimes you're just sort of hoping you got it right, that they have enough budget to afford it. And then the last piece is lucrative. And there is no shame in making money. There is no shame in you profiting. And one of the mistakes I see a lot from my designers is that there's almost like and we do it as AIGA chapters too, like we just have to break even, right? That the reality is a lot of effort goes into what you're doing, and you need to do more than break even with it. You need to be able to say that was worth the effort of that project, and I am now able to have the security and the growth I want because I did this project. We're in business to make money, and I think across the board sometimes as designers we forget and we start to think that we're in this because we love the work and we're proud of the work, and it's like the work is great, it needs to be an ideal project, but it also needs to be ideally priced. So that's my philosophy on that. Now I want to go into some specific models around sort of what the numbers are that, and these are generally, and at the agency level, it's a really broad range because there's so many different levels of agencies. But the idea of where some of these ideal projects and upsells and downsells come in for agencies is outlined here. And I'm going to go through all of the different sort of levels of people and models, I guess is the word for that. So generally speaking, for an agency, an ideal project, an ideal entry point into a client is going to be no less than $15K. And I think that's really still on the low end, but for a newer agency, that might be a sort of starting place. I find a general rule of thumb is that an ideal project should be somewhere around about 1/10 of whatever your target annual revenue is. And the reason for that is that most agencies can handle about 10 of the clients that would upsell, right? 10 of these ideal clients that you would be able to do extended work. And if we base that on sort of, it's just an average of I don't even know where the average came from, but it's turned out to work as a good average of if you look at, like, if I had 10 clients doing consistent work over the course of the year, how would I would make this much money, right? So if your target is 150, then your average project size is probably 15K. If you're, you're looking at is that 1 million times 10? I don't know. Yeah, 1 million. Then a 100K project, right? So, and then the upsell is, so this immediate sell would be a website, an app, a video, a trade show, a product, a book, a report, a magazine. Sometimes it's often like like I have a client that does a lot of magazines, and she'll do or custom pubs, and she'll do the redesign as her ideal project, and then her upsell will be the ongoing work across the course of a year or whatever the engagement is. So same thing within the agency model. And then the lower piece, I find the audit, discovery, consults, that piece that gets you to a proposal is usually in that sort of 5 to 10K realm, in terms of 10 to 15K if you're going in at the beginning of a year and helping them plan their budgets and really think about how they're going to be spending money. It's a good way to have, like, once you have these strategic relationships with clients, you can then you can develop that relationship where they just get in the habit of thinking through what they need to be doing with their budgets. And then you can always apply this downsell into first projects or spread it out over whatever. It doesn't mean that, because you would do that strategy work anyway in the work with them as part of their projects. It's just a way to get the money up front for doing the thinking up front. And then I didn't talk about it before, but the nurture piece below the downsell is just when someone says no, then you need a way that you're continuing to develop the relationship, or not yet, right? There's hard no's of no, never work with you. And then there's the timing's just not right, or the rapport with this particular contact just isn't right, and you're waiting for that contact to go away, which they do, right? Contacts change pretty frequently. And so the idea is that you have this free content, this nurture content, that you have some way of distributing and creating your thought leadership. And then also, when you get a no or not yet, always having a way to move them specifically to the next phase. So if not now, when, right? When would you, do you think following up in 3 months, 6 months, a year would be helpful, so that you at least know what that prospect looks like over time from the nurture. And that works across all of the things. I forgot to mention it last time. So that's the agency model. I've had a client that got a first project that was $1 million, right? So there's no limit on what this is. It's just, you have to know that if you're looking at those really large projects, you are looking at a longer sales process, and that there may be smaller projects that you could do to get in. The other thing about the downsell that's really helpful across the board is that it gets you in a system. So if they have a big vendor management system and you've got to get in the system, then having that first little project that they can pass through quickly without a lot of approvals gets you in the system and makes it easier for them to buy from you in the future. And that's what you want to do along the way always, is to make it as easy as possible for them to buy from you. And so that's the agency model. Down from that would be like a startup agency model, right? And what I find, this is where a lot of the clients I work with sort of live and exist. And so we tend to work on, how do we get to that place where all of your projects are an average of 10 to 35K, and what does that project look like, and then what does the upsell from there look like? And then the audits and the discoveries at this stage are usually in that sort of 1,500 to 5,000, which could end up being like a 3,500 is sort of the sweet spot at that. That it feels like it's low enough to justify and easy enough for them to go ahead and expense and make happen pretty quickly. And then if we take it to the freelance model, you're just going down the scale a little bit. And out of the freelance model, different than the contractor model, which is an hourly rate, freelance really still should be, like, the goal of every freelancer should be to get to project pricing over hourly pricing. As long as you're doing hourly pricing, you're really still considered, you're a contractor. That was the differentiation on my model, the difference between freelance and contractor. And the same thing between being a freelancer and a business. There are a couple of you on here that I know that called yourselves freelancers that I know are actually really small businesses, right? And there's a shift in the mindset when you go from I'm a freelancer to I'm a business. And there's a shift in the perception of value when you go from I'm a freelancer to I'm a business. And beginning to position yourself that way as and even the difference between a freelancer and a consultant, right? And so making sure you're using your words very carefully in this realm, because generally speaking, a freelancer is it can be considered a little bit of a hobbyist, and and someone that isn't necessarily taking their business very seriously. And so just be aware of that. And the same thing with a contractor. A contractor is really just an hourly employee that isn't employed full time, right? And so, so again, language. Enough on that. But the idea for this is 5 to 10K. Like the goal is really, how do you get projects into that 10K? And the way you get there is by choosing the kind of client you go after, right? If you're only going after small businesses, then you're going to be on the lower end of the scale. If you're figuring out how you get to work with mid-cap and larger companies, it's really about how do you choose the prospects that you're going after with the intention of who could pay me $10,000 for a project versus, this referral came in and they can only afford $1,500, right? It's a different model. And it's not necessarily about being pushy and salesy. It is about being very intentional and targeted about who you want to work with. And it's in that intention of, these are the kind of clients I'd like. How do the relationships that I have move me in the direction of those clients I really want to work with? And so none of us are separated from anybody we need to know by more than 2 or 3 degrees anymore, thanks to LinkedIn and just thanks to the way the world works. But it becomes about putting a strategy behind that based off of your intentions around the kind of work you want to do. And that piece allows even a freelancer to be moving into those 10K projects. And the reality of that is sales is not fun for anybody, even salespeople. And you want to do as little sales as possible. And so the best way to do as little sales as possible is to get the projects that are as big as possible. And it creates a stability for you that allows you to breathe a little more rather than having to constantly hustle for new work. So that's it's not about greed or money, but it's about the simplicity of, back to that prosperity and that quality of life, is that when you are more intentional about what the work is that you're going after, then you can relax more into the work and enjoy the work instead of always feeling like you're having to hustle just to keep the bills paid and just to stay ahead of the game. So, and it's especially true back to the agencies. It's especially true like when you've got employees to be responsible for, right? There's a different level of hustle of, now you're not just worried about yourself, but now you've got other people that depend on you to be able to continue to grow and to continue to expand so that you can provide safety and security for them. So that is that. And then the last piece is the hourly piece. And all of this still applies, even though you're talking about hourly. Whether contractor or whether full-time, you're an hourly worker, right? At some point, people are calculating how much you make based off of, the formula is 20/80, the number of hours in a work week. And so I think I did one for salary, so I'll skip on that. So we're going to have hourly contractors at this point. When you're doing hourly rates, the ideal rate is your regular rate. It's your monthly, your regular rate if they were to hire you for something consistent. So monthly or whatever that is. It's just and it's best when paid in advance. And if they're not willing to pay you in advance, then it should be a higher rate. And so you give this like the way you incentivize people to simplify your money is by pricing accordingly around your whether or not they're willing to invest in advance. I worked only on retainer as recruiter. I still only work on retainer as recruiter. Different than my coaching, but or not really different than my coaching. My coaching is really on retainer too. But the idea that if someone really wants to work with you, then and you've built a rapport and you've sold them on the process, then they're willing to pay you not after you've delivered, but as a good faith in the partnership. And so I remember the first conversation I had with a client about being on retainer as a recruiter, because there weren't that many in the market at the time, was, I've never worked with a recruiter and retainer. Why would I do that? And I was like, you don't have to. It's just if you want to work with me, that's the way I work. And a couple of 3 days later, he called me back and was like, everybody keeps telling me I need to work with you, so I guess I have to figure this out. And but if I had said yes to his first pushback, I would have just compromised myself and not. But I had to take that chance of letting him walk away. And when he came back, he was one of my best clients for 7 years. So that was one of those moments for me where it was like, when I know my value, when I hold my value, when I expect people to value me, then everything else shifts. When I first started doing the sales consulting back in 2001, I was charging like $20 an hour. I was just being paid hourly, right? It was just I'd been doing really high margins in the staffing company where I worked, and had gotten lots of recognition for being able to sell high margins and high value for somebody else. But the moment I started to sell myself, and I see this a lot with my clients, the moment I started to sell myself, I started to question, and I started to want to bargain price everything I was doing. And it was that shift when I moved to retain recruitment. And it happened because I had a mentor that one day in a class I was in with him shook the change in his pockets, and he was like, "Sherra, I wish I could take advantage, or I wish you lived in Cincinnati," which is where I was. "I'd like to take advantage of you the way all those people down in Atlanta do." And it was such a start, like, yeah, I am undervaluing myself, aren't I? And I literally came home that next week, decided I was a retained recruiter, had a conversation with somebody who challenged me on working on retainer and expecting payment in advance, and met the challenge. And then everything shifted about how I worked after that. And so I promise you, if you're in this hourly pricing mindset of they'll pay me after I do the work, that the only thing that's keeping you from being paid in advance is your own mindset. And so I encourage you to change that. But the other part is, if you want to give them a discount, they need to be willing to commit quarterly, annually, at some larger scale, right? And then you can think about doing some kind of discount based off of that volume rate, that volume pay, that what they're willing to do in advance. The reality is, in the downsell perspective, is at the honest rate. If somebody wants a quick project, a small project, a quick turn, whatever, there's not much investment. That is not the time to compromise on your price. That is the time when you hold your price, and you actually you make it a little more painful for smaller engagements. And that's different than what I was talking about before in terms of getting the consultative engagement, right? Because the consultative engagement it's not about undervaluing, it's actually about being valued for your thinking. And so it's not about being basement priced or being driven down for somebody else's tiny budget, right? It's about getting them to engage with you at whatever level they can afford to engage with you to get started. And then for my hourly and my freelancers, there's this whole weird thing that happens in the market that I don't understand, but I have my design rate and I have my production rate. And it's like, you have a rate, and unless you're outsourcing to somebody else to do your production, you don't have a production rate, because the moment you have a production rate, that is now your rate. That is now how they value you, because you're willing to compromise on your value. And so if you are working on an hourly basis right now, that's the first thing I'd like you to stop doing, is to just have a rate and figure out how to manage that rate within this kind of model. So we're almost done. So for those of you that are on here, they're in-house and full-time and doing salaries, all of this applies to salary too, on a different scale, on a different level. Like, and if you're a manager and you're negotiating salaries, this is something else to think about as well. So everybody has their ideal salary in mind of what they'd really like to make. It needs to be based on knowing what the market will bear and what the company sort of standards are. It's based on your need, but you never talk about your need when you talk about it to the customer. In any price negotiation, you never talk about what you need. As much as, I mean, again, I only work on retainer is a boundary around how you work, but that is not, I need to pay my mortgage. That is not I have student loans to pay, right? None of that matters in a negotiation. You simply want to be talking about what value you're going to bring and how that translates into that equation of the cost of them hiring you versus the value that you're going to be able to create for them. One of the ways, if you want to make more money, and this is one of the reasons I try to teach people to sell, is one of the best ways to add value and create more value for yourself is to have some kind of tie to the to a commission or a bonus structure that is about you helping drive growth. It's about helping you build business. It's the clients and the relationships you can bring. So, and so that piece of it, I think, is it's something people forget when they're in salary negotiations, and they just get into sort of splitting pennies over even over a couple of $1,000s. Sometimes when you amortize that out over 20/80, like it's not a lot of money, and certainly $2,000 is more money most of the time to the employee than it is to the employer. And I counsel clients all the time, like, if you really want somebody, you don't want to lose them over $2,000. Also, on the candidate side of it, it's like, if you really want the job, don't lose the job over $2,000. Like, that's a a tiny freelance project you can go pick up if you want to do that. But again, one of the ways to bring value is that you're part of the new business process with the company that you're going to be working with, and you're able to bring that value and bring that growth. The downsell is, if they really can't afford your desired salary, is figure out what they can afford in other trade-offs, more time or benefits. Work from home is sort of universal now, but flex hours and things like that. There's always conference attendances and different kinds of continuing education. There's all of those little intangibles sometimes that you can negotiate that people forget that they can ask for if they're having to compromise. And again, it becomes about, how do you sell a combined value, a total value, if you're having to negotiate with someone down on price? Where is that sort of overlay of if I give this, can you give this back in return? And just being able to have that conversation, being really comfortable with negotiation. And I think that's one of the places that most designers, when you talk about the sort of the value of design conversation we have in AIGA, my overall perspective on it is really that one of the reasons design gets undervalued is because designers don't know how to negotiate the value. They don't know how to have the sales conversations and really get to what is the client trying to accomplish and what is the value on that, and where is the trade in value, because that's all negotiation is a trade in value, right? So anyway, so the last piece of my little ideal scenario is this idea of an ideal prospect. And for me, when I think about ideal prospects for my clients and for myself, it's like I want there to be a level of intention about what it is I'm trying to accomplish, or what they're trying to accomplish in growth. Like, when you're thinking about who your prospects are, whether it's for a job or a client, who makes a great case study for what it is that you're doing or want to be doing more of, and how do you go specifically after the kind of people that you'd want to work with and that would be great to work with. The discoverable piece for me is, will they give you enough information, and can you find enough information about them, right? One of the first things that I look at when I'm helping people build prospect lists is, can we find a phone number or an email, or can you get to them directly through LinkedIn? Is there a way for you to access that person directly that isn't intrusive and makes sense, and and all those kinds of things, but you have to be able to access them. If they're walled off behind 5 gatekeepers, and you're never going to get to have a conversation. Or like in staffing, one of the reasons I got out of doing some of the recruiting was because you couldn't actually have a conversation with the direct client. You had to go through some vendor management system and submit resumes blindly, and there was no relationship. And if there's no relationship and you're just going to be stabbing in the dark at stuff, that's not an ideal client. There's going to be so many limitations and so much guesswork in the work you do that it's and it's going to be so hard to get to them, to sell to them. So from a prospect perspective, that's one of the sort of how we prioritize. You want a client that's experienced. You don't want to have to train them how to work with you. You don't want them to, you want them to appreciate the process that you're bringing, and not be overly naive about it, so that you're having to, all of you know that the client that pays you the least is the client that makes you work the hardest. So when we're thinking about an ideal prospect, we want to go as high up on that food chain as we can in terms of sophistication and knowledge of our process. Obviously, we want them to be appreciative. We want people that are willing to give reviews and to offer, or not reviews, but recommendations and referrals, and that are excited about the work we're doing. I have a relatively new client that one of his clients is helping him language and position for the market better, and to and helping him create content that will help him get more customers, because she so appreciates the work that he does for him, that he does for her. So that's the kind of client you want. And I have there may be some of you on here. A friend, one of my clients, messaged out today to make sure everybody that she knew to come on the call. And so so there's that kind of appreciation for the work that we do is is a part of having an ideal client. And then the loyal piece is that you want them coming back for more and more work. You don't want to have to be selling. Customer acquisition costs of having to sell to a new customer is so much higher than being able to go back into a customer and get more and more work from them, and finding more and more needs from them as they grow to trust you more and let you see behind the curtain a little more. So we look for that trait in people rather than the people that are always pitting you against somebody else trying to drive your price down, right? And RFPs are the worst for that. You never know when you do an RFP if they're really interested in you or whether they're just trying to get you to underbid the person they really want to give the work to, right? And you don't want to work for, like, you know, certainly there may be times you work for people, but when you're talking about sales as a proactive effort, you want that proactivity to be in the direction of this ideal kind of formula of a client that you really, really want to work with, and that you can have a long, successful client relationship with. And so with that, some of you have seen this with me before. This is my first talk I ever did for AIG Atlanta, was Name Your Niche, or niche, ever however you want to say that. And it's based on this Japanese concept of the ikigai, of what do you love, what are you good at, what do you get paid for, and what does the world need? And I think this is from the standpoint, and what the world needs is to sort of lead you to this sweet spot for what's next. In that, the interesting part is that sometimes it's in the overlap that excludes what you're necessarily yet good at. And sometimes it's that you're good enough at it. Not that you don't have any skill at it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're already an expert at it, because in this world needs piece, you're in a space that is front enough of trend. Maybe not everybody is good at it. And I'll use UX as an example. So when UX first came on the scene, as sort of a practice within design, nobody was good at it from the standpoint of there weren't programs that taught it. There was no necessarily accreditation. People were just doing it and figuring it out, but the world needed it. And the people that did that and figured it out quickly were making more money than a regular designer, because they were figuring out how to position in the market at a higher value level. And so that piece of it is where the highest level opportunities are, is when you can be on that front of trend of what the world needs, even if you stand in that and you think, well, I'm not yet an expert at that, but you look around and you see neither is anybody else. So how do I step into that and trust that as a designer, I have enough problem solving skills that I can get there, I can figure this out, and my clients can benefit from it. And so I would say there's no more pressing time than right now for that kind of bravery around the world needs something very different than it's ever needed before. And how we are going to be in the world going forward is going to be so different than how we were before March of 2020. And you being able to step into that is where you'll find opportunities. And in this market, where it's easy to say, oh, we're going into recession and people don't value design in recessions. It's like the world needs more design now than it's ever needed, because the problems now become so much more complex, and so much more communication is needed about what's going on that that this is the time for you to step in and not be necessarily worried about who needs a brochure and who needs a logo, but who needs your thinking, who needs the way that you see the world and what you know about vast amounts of industries you're because you've had a complex weaving of experiences with different kinds of clients, or because you've developed a really deep knowledge within a particular market. So one of the things in sales process that I find my clients are able to contribute to the conversation with their prospects because they're having conversations with other people like them, and they're able to bring in information of what I'm seeing in the market is, what I've noticed is, and that kind of sort of seed planning and cross-pollinating has value for the market and that's one of the things about sales to me that makes it more of a design problem than it is some kind of business process, because sales is really going in and understanding what the problem is somebody has and what the value of it is, and how you can help them fix that problem and deliver that with value. And so when you think about sales in that way, it becomes more of the strategy and the consultation that every designer aspires to, right? So it takes a little bit of the sort of icky guy in a suit kind of feeling out of it and allows you to really I don't know, to take some of the ickiness out of the process, for lack of a better word. I don't know, it's kind of a silly way to say it, but anyway, with that, I at this stage that's the content, and I will just share with you a little bit of an offer. One of the things that I've been doing with folks is right now for the summer, I believe there's a really great opportunity. Sales cycles are typically about 90 days. And there's a really great opportunity right now to spend this summer in the midst of, while we're still sort of in lockdown and in pandemic, even as things start to go back to normal, of really digging into who do you want your ideal client to be? What are the unique opportunities you have because of this market? And how can you use that to generate some cash flow pretty quick? And so I have 3 different ways I'm working with folks right now. I have individual coaching, I have small group coaching, and then large group coaching at all different price points. I'm making a guarantee right now of 5 times your investment on at those different price points. So if you're in a position where you'd like some help doing this, I'd love to have a conversation with you about that. And you can schedule with me using this link. I think Katie's going to type it in for us. And this one is my first conversation with anybody is always free. My scheduler will schedule it out for next week. There's nothing on the schedule for today, but I do have a little bit of time this afternoon if anybody is itching for a conversation. I think I've got three spots this afternoon after 3 o'clock. If you would like to jump on a quick call and talk about what's going on for you and how we could get you making money. But in that 5-week process, in that 5 times process, it's a 5-week process of training that would allow you to, again, sort of look at what your ideal project is, build your prospect list, define what your ideal project is, and then have some coaching and some support as you go through those sales calls and really getting a structure to how you do sales. And most of my clients are getting, as I said at the beginning, 10-time returns. I'm guaranteeing the 5-time return in that anybody that does any of these 3 processes, if you don't get a 5-time return, I will refund your money on September 1st. So this will be the only time I do that. I'm doing it. It's a pandemic pricing kind of thing. I think it'll be a fun way to do the summer. And I'm trying to do, back to the ideal client, I'm trying to do some proof of concept on some stuff, and would love to have you involved if that's something that makes sense for you. And if not, you're welcome to these slides. And I have a prosperous pricing checklist that if you want to sign up on for my email list and to stay in touch over time, this is a way for you to do that. And with that, I think we have a few minutes left if anybody has any Q&A. So 8 minutes. Anybody else?
Go ahead and use the Q&A box or the chat. We'll keep an eye on both of them.
Sorry, I feel like I just sprinted through all that information. So hopefully it was helpful.
And big thank you to Sherra. I know this is a time that we all kind of are trying to think on our toes and wrap our heads around the future of, the possible recession or depression that we hope doesn't come, but it's totally possible. And so, keeping things profitable is key.
So I'll just ask before, while we have a few minutes, if you don't have a question, I would love to see in the chat sort of what did I say that was helpful? Or was there anything that I said that was confusing? Or that you would, is there anything I need to sort of explain in more detail?
I think for me as an in-house employee who freelances sort of on the side, I never know what to price projects. And so I took a little picture of your freelance slide for pricing just to kind of have an idea of a starting point, because it's not something that I'm familiar with and I'm not trained in business at all. So having that idea of like, okay, here's where to start was really helpful.
Right. Good. Yeah. I can't help but look at John Hornsby just said looking at the sales process as a design problem, and I think for me that is the only lens to see anything through when you're a designer, right? Just everything is a design problem. Everything is a puzzle. I was on a coaching call with one of my clients earlier today, and he's like, I just need to connect the dots for them, right? I was like, that's all we're ever doing in a sales process is just figuring out which dots to connect for somebody else. And Xavier's asking, do I think there's an opportunity for designers to prosper through helping small businesses pivot their services? I do. I think a lot that has to happen with small businesses sometimes is that you try to get into a specific niche within small businesses, and you look for ways that you can template the work that you do, not in a way but that you can leverage something you do for one client for another client. And that's true across all of your clients, right? If you're one of the benefits of working in a niche is that you begin to develop an expertise in a model that works across for a lot of different people. And with the small businesses in particular, and I work with a lot of startup design agencies, small businesses, and they often have a lot more money. Sometimes they have more money than you think, or if you're really being able to tie it to the value you're creating, they'll find the money, right? And if you can help them start with one thing like a website that'll help them make more money, then they can look at doing a more complex branding system down the road or something like that. And I think sometimes we get that backwards, but if we're thinking about what's one thing or a sales sheet that they can use until they can afford a website. But I have one of my clients that I worked with that works with other coaches. And what we worked on was a system for high value work for coaches that have 6-figure plus income, and then templated work for the coaches that are just getting started that didn't have the resources necessarily. And so there's definitely room for designers to work with small businesses. It's just you have to look at it not from they can't afford what I'm doing, but how do I create something that creates enough value that they're able to justify the cost of whatever the investment of whatever you're doing. So Mark is asking, prospect list, what are the matrix insights to select best targets to approach? And well, that is really back to the that ideal language. That's really the matrix I was trying to create, is this idea that you want highest value possible, like largest projects possible. You want it to be work that you enjoy, that you have a depth of knowledge in. You want to be able to access enough context. You want and you want to be sort of in that alignment with them, that what you're trying to do next matches up with what they're trying to do, right? So that it's a mix of it's good for you and it's good for them, and that really win-win kind of scenario. And so when I work with my clients on how to prioritize their prospects, I'm really looking at who can you access the fastest, that has the biggest budget, that is doing work you'd really like to do. And that's why I like to start with those. The first exercise I do with almost all my clients is tell me about your favorite projects. And we dissect the projects and we look at where the profitability was, where they lost money, where they were in the mix of being able to be strategic, not just implementing. So the that piece of it, I think, is when you put all of that together, then you're able to dissect. And I will tell you the best way to do this. We got 2 minutes. This is a little bonus tip for those of you that have stayed to the end. The best way to go find prospects today is go into LinkedIn, download your data, look at your LinkedIn list, and look for opportunities where the question you're asking yourself, after you've figured out what your ideal project is, the question you're asking yourself is, who on this list could either hire me or refer me into an ideal project? And you will be surprised how much opportunity is in that list. For me, every time I do it with a client, there's usually at least 5 to 10 really solid prospects that they could go have a conversation with that day about that kind of ideal project that would open up an opportunity for them to be able to get work pretty quickly. And if it doesn't do that, it catapults them into new thinking about other ideal projects. So anyway, all right, I think that's it. Unless there's any more questions, I think we're right at 1 o'clock, and we'll let Katie sign us off.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherra. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is the second webinar in our series. We'll be having another webinar next Thursday at noon on June 4th, and we hope you can join us for that one. And like Sherra said, we have our portfolio review coming up for students. So if you know any students or young designers that maybe work for you or intern for you that need to be reviewed, let us know. Hop in, have them sign up. And thank you guys so much. Thank you, Sherra.
Hi, thank you.
Everybody have a great day.